Hi everyone, good evening for me. Anyway, it's 8 p.m. here. Um, Welcome to our second, or my second heart-to-heart conversation, in which I invite fellow writers to have honest conversations about the writing process. And today we'll be talking with John Robin, author of A Thousand Roads. He's already on there, so I can invite him in a second. Let me first shortly introduce him a little bit, how I got to know him, and then I'll get John on and I'll let him introduce himself a little bit as well. Though I see him, oh, there he is again. This is an interesting, I'm still working out the Facebook, how it works exactly. Okay, so how do I know John? Well, first of all, John is a writer, but John is also he runs an editing company, Story Perfect Editing, and a publishing house for erotica, Deep Desires Press, together with his husband. This is not how I got to know John. I know John because a mutual friend of ours invited me into a NaNoWriMo accountability group during, I think, Camp April 2 years ago, so 2017. So this is how I got to know John, and eventually, of course, realized John is like me, an editor. And then John started hiring me for some jobs, and then he also last year he took me under his wing as a copywriting and ghostwriting apprentice. So I've been learning the craft in the past year, and we've had lots of fun with lots of fun and cool projects. It's really been fun working together. But of course, we also discuss our struggles as writers. So one of the other things that I know John for is that John introduced me to the writing sprint. So sprinting, like setting a timer, sprinting with your friends, see how many words you can get done, and then you have a little break and then you go again. I'm not sure if this is correct, but sometimes it feels to me that John organizes about most of his day using sprints. So when I told him that the first interview took over an hour, he was like, "Yeah, no, we can do that in 25 minutes." And usually our sprints are like 20, 25 minutes. So what I told him, I said, "Okay, well, this is a nice dare." So I brought a timer. So as soon as I invite John in, I'll set the timer to 25 minutes, and then we'll see whether we can actually say everything we have to say about the writing process. And we'll be talking about John's writing process, about his writing of A Thousand Roads, which took him about, if I'm not wrong, 6 years. And I've been working for 17 years on and off, so since I was 15 years old, on my young adult fantasy novel. So it'll be nice to talk a little bit, because we know that there's a lot of stress about writing fast and publishing fast. And here we are, super slow. We do have other projects on the side, of course, and we're both editors, so we run our own companies, and so we do have a lot to do. But it would be nice to have two of us slow bees talk about that. So he keeps popping on and off. So the next time he's on, yes, I'll see if I can invite him. I hope his connection is good. So that's adding. Last time we had so much trouble with this, so let's see if it's working. Yes, there is John. Okay, John, so here's my timer. I'm gonna put it to 25 minutes, and then you can introduce yourself. Do you hear me? Yes, okay.
Okay, I can hear
Okay,
you. Yeah,
so 25 minutes on the clock.
25. Okay, this is an official
It's an
sprint,
official sprint.
interview
Yes.
sprint.
The first one, I'm assuming, of your first interview sprint.
Yeah, I've never tried it for that. I usually do it. I mean, sprint works for anything where you're just focusing on one task. So I guess this could
This is a
apply, right?
task. We need to create
Yeah,
knowledge.
yeah. It's a
Yeah,
good task.
25 minutes. Okay, so first introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll dig in.
Okay, well, I'm John Robin. I'm an epic fantasy writer, and I guess I run a editing company called Story Perfect Editing Services. It started as a freelance editing company, and it got really busy, so it sort of expanded, and we have a team of more than 10 people who are all working on various projects at different times. And we branched out into publishing in 2017. So that's Deep Desires Press that you mentioned. We just crossed 80 titles that we've published
Excellent. Yeah.
recently. So we've learned a lot. We're still learning a lot. And yeah, I guess I mean at my heart, I always think of myself as a writer. I mean, end game for me would be I'm making a living on the fantasy books that
Hmm.
I write. But yeah, as you mentioned, in the meantime, we like every writer has to make it somehow, right? And you don't make it right off the hop with this big $100,000 book deal. I mean, that'd be
Yeah.
nice. Does
Yeah.
happen sometimes, but for the most part,
Yeah.
we do other things, and it's just important to make sure your lifestyle complements your writing
Yes.
goals, because sometimes you can be in a work situation that is toxic for that. So yeah.
And I think we're both in a line of work
So
that is very inspiring.
yeah, I think, working with other writers, that's the thing that I think really charges me up.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, when you're working as an editor and you're kind of becoming a creative collaborator with other authors. So
Yeah.
you're still working with stories, you're developing the same skill you develop when you're writing your own stories. You just did it from a different angle.
Yeah.
So I think I can't think of any better type of work for a writer sort of slowly developing their career through the work they
Yeah.
write
And it's yeah, it's
than
one of our yeah.
editing or coaching or.
It is one of our viewers, Sandra, is watching, and I just met her for the first time in real life yesterday, and she brought the book that I edited because she was
Oh,
finalizing it,
wonderful.
so that was really nice to actually hold like, oh yeah, I edited this, and then that was very nice. She had a nice acknowledgement in the front saying that part of my edits made her
Hmm.
swear, but we're good, we're good. It was really nice. It was really nice.
Those are the best kind of
Yes,
edits.
yes, right. She said so. She said so. She said so. Yeah, so that's nice. But that
Yeah.
sort of made it. And then, of course, because I had my goodbye party last night, so my mom was there as well. So I could be like, look, mom, this is what I do. So it was nice to show people like
Mm,
I work on this kind of stuff. So it was nice, but it also just nice to have a bond
yeah.
like that with one of the people that you edit for, like with one of the writers. Just see them together, see the
Oh,
finished
yeah,
product.
yeah.
That was very nice. Yeah. Okay, you want to?
Especially when you don't know each other or if you're working remotely, so you might be in different cities
Yes.
and you work together, and then you have that chance to come together when the final work is done and you hold it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that was very like that
that's a
almost
good,
never
nice.
happens because I work with people across the globe. So this was very like
Hmm.
very nice to have that
Yeah,
that in life connection. Okay, so you want to dig in?
absolutely.
Because of course
Yeah,
what I want to talk about
guide
and
me.
like I just said, like people tell me, so when did you start writing your book? Well, I had the first idea when I was 15, so that's 17 years ago. And of course
Hmm.
what I wrote down then looks
Yeah.
nothing like what I have now, but the idea never left me. And if I'm correctly, for you it's been 6 years in the making.
6 years on a thousand
Yes.
roads. Like you, I've been writing fantasy of various sorts since I was a teen. And that's rolled over into, I want to say I have a stack of beginnings that go up to my knee. They're filed away in a drawer. And, that's sort of me just, I want to write a fantasy
Yeah.
story, but kept changing my mind. But yeah, so about 6 years ago would be the first time like a fantasy novel stuck to me. And I kept to the end and I had a draft. And then I did various things over the last 6 years. So I mean, I wasn't just doing nothing but that book. But yeah, it's been 6 years, a little more than that, since I started writing that first draft and to where I am right now.
Because now you are, so it's out now. Like the paperback came out last January, right? Like I'm sure you have a copy there,
Yeah, well,
and
it
it's
was
so big. It's so
I
big.
I I did prepare. It's very
Yes.
big.
It's a
Actually,
great
so
cover.
the ebook came out. I Thank you. Yeah, well, this is Ave, our cover
And
designer. He is
it's great
amazing at
because
everything
I
he does.
remember that we had to vote on the cover, like with our NaNoWriMo accountability group, and
Yeah.
it looks nothing like it. It's a completely different cover, but I'm happy. I'm happy with the
No,
change.
I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to. Okay. There's a little story to that. I'll be quick. That first cover that we're voting on, I was heavily involved. And I realized, you know what? I'm being one of those nightmare cover clients that I always don't want to, because it's so hard when you're also directing things to step out.
Yeah.
And I realized, no, I'm the author. I'm going to step back. And what happened is I gave Abe complete freedom, no more voting. And he came up with this, and it's like 10 times better than where it was going when I was so
Yeah.
caught up on how I wanted it to look. And yet I think that's often the best.
Yeah.
We find best results in all the other publications we've done when there's some freedom to interpret, and so the author provides the elements
Yeah.
and inspiration, but then the cover itself is a creative work. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
But I guess would you say then,
so it's
I was going to say, would you say
hmm,
that because we were going to talk about also the fact that we've been very, because like I said, like you have a stack of beginnings, but for me, the story I'm still working
mhm,
on, I'm still working on the first book. That came to me when I was 15. So I do have a few beginnings, but I've
mm,
always returned to the same
yeah,
story. So I know already this is going to be my big thing.
okay,
So I'm going to take as long as I
yeah,
need. But do you also
yeah.
think, especially like with things like the cover, that you feel like you want to control everything? Do you also think sometimes that when it's been a part of you for so long, it becomes even more difficult to be like, okay, you take those reins because I need a step back. Like it becomes such a part of you. So
Hmm,
do you think it becomes more difficult then?
hmm. Oh yeah, it is hard. Yeah, the last couple of years, one thing that have found helpful is because right now I'm going through this book for the eighth time, and so I've kind of thought of each revision as like a draft, because every time I've gone over, I've been quite free in how much I can change.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a little some I don't know where this wisdom came from, but it sort of floats around writing communities that after you finish a draft, you should put it away and work on something else for a couple months or whatever before you come
Yeah,
back
I
to
think
it.
Stephen King says
And
6 weeks.
that might,
I
yeah,
think
I
that's
mean, I
Stephen
know he
King. Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
mentions it. It
yes.
could be, yeah. And I mean, I've heard that advice in various forms, like the Writing Excuses podcast. I've heard that echoed
Yeah,
throughout
yeah.
different episodes. So I mean, it's something that many writers will swear by. And I thought, oh, I'll try this out. I mean, it's been fun. I've written various things. I've written courses for a learning platform called Highbrow,
Yeah.
and I picked away at a just a sort of crime fiction novel that I don't know what's going to become of it, but it was just a fun draft that I played with. And I've written other things under ghostwriting titles that maybe I won't tell what genre they are. But so
Maybe that's for the best.
anyway,
Yeah.
my husband and I, yeah,
Well, I already told
we have
everyone what
actually,
kind of publishing house you have, so you can't say, yeah, you're
yeah,
already out. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, my other works are out there in other forms, but
Yeah, and
I'll let
we
you
we
guess.
know that you help him write certain stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's all
yeah.
good. It's
So,
all good.
but I mean, I think that has been a huge help for making progress in A Thousand Roads, and even just my vision for what I want to do with writing fantasy stories, because it disconnects me from you can get myopic sometimes when you're stuck in one work. I think in your case, like you mentioned, you've been working on it for 17 years, and the thing about that time is like, I think you also get as much recharge out of just a little time away from it and then
It's
coming
been
back.
like
So
I've
it's
been away from it for years sometimes
yeah,
because it's I've
hmm,
only been working, I've only been seeing myself as a writer for the past 3, maybe 4 years. And that's when I realized, like, I've been picking
hmm,
away at the first 7 chapters for that whole period. And I put it away and I found it again. And then, oh, it was summer. And I organized my room and I was like, oh, what is this? Oh, yeah, I was writing this. So it's been a
yeah,
constant, and I've started other projects in between. So yeah, it's not 17 years just focused because you know what, I would have been done by then if I still
Hmm.
wouldn't be like I should have picked another project. Like I would have
Yeah,
been done, but it's good. Like it's still like it's still somewhere. Like it's still brewing. I still have new
yeah,
ideas.
yeah.
Yeah, it's still not there yet. Like it's still yeah, just there. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think Pat Rothfuss. I haven't ever found this published somewhere, but I've just heard it. Heard someone say that it took him 14 years to write The Name of the Wind,
Um,
and like I think he wrote all three books. But he didn't finalize the last two, but he wrote them and then he toiled away at the first book for something like a 14-year
Perfect.
period
Yeah.
just
Mm.
until it was perfect before he published
And
it.
it's not
So,
as big as
you know,
yours.
and I'm
Like it's not as thick as A Thousand Roads is. Not my copy anyway.
uh
I don't know the word count, but my
you mean
copy is not as massive as yours is. Uh,
you mean you're talking about The Name of
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Wind, right? Yeah, I think word count it's either close or slightly more.
Ah, well then it's just my copy, just probably
But
flimsy
this
paper.
Yeah, this thing here is thicker because like this is just a proof copy that I'm going through
Ah,
right now.
okay.
Like this bookmark here is, you know,
You
that's
are.
where I'm at in it. And to get inspired, I have this pipe that someone got me for Christmas. It's like my Tolkien pipes. I don't smoke, but I carry it
Whatever
with me. When I'm working on this,
whatever
this
gets
comes
you
up.
inspired. That's whatever works, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so but yeah, this is pretty thick because the font is big. I wanted to go through it like a book because you know all I've ever seen is the words on a computer screen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so there's that. And of course, we didn't know when we first put this together. We didn't know what the book would look like until we got a proof copy. So there's certain things like we are going to shrink the font down. Actually, I have a copy of The Name of the Wind, and we're gonna model the final book that gets
Yeah,
released
my cop yeah,
after that
my
quite a bit.
copy is a very small font of In the Name of the Wind. It's very small.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's typical for epic fantasy. You kind of it makes it look like there's more adventure waiting on every
Yeah,
page.
but also
It's I don't
imagine what
know.
the book would be like. Yeah.
Oh yeah, if it was if it
Like
was
I'm a
bigger
big
font.
Cassandra Clare fan. And those last
Hmm.
novels of her,
Hmm.
the last four she wrote, I tend to read those like in one go. So give me 24 hours and I'll be done. Except for the last one, as Sheena's watching and she agrees. We both had like, come on, pick up the pace. So there was something not entirely right for us there.
Mm,
But I always my wrists hurt
yeah.
so badly with those books because they're
Mm,
like your size, like the proof copy of A Thousand Roses. It's so big, and you have to crack it open, and you have to keep
yeah.
it open. So I always get like almost
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
you know, I can't write for a day just because I'm reading this really big book. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, you don't want it to turn into that. So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, let me
So,
see because Sandra has a comment there. Oh, Sheena, yeah, it was horrible. I know
okay.
it was horrible. So Sandra says some of our stories are
Oh,
so
you're
fast.
talking.
We need life to give us additional experience. To get us to the right place in our minds to write or deepen our work in progress. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, we do. And that's why I think it's
Hmm.
like if I'd finished this when I was 15, like there wouldn't be much of a story, but I aged. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the same for
Yeah.
you, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's all about the passage of time. I mean, another side to this is I had originally my goal was to get the print book out in January, and I could definitely cut out everything else from my week and go nothing but revision of the book to get it out. But I realized that you know what? No, what's going to make this good in the end is the other things I keep up every week, because I have a pretty strict reading discipline. Like the various goals I set for reading, and I find every week I learn so much, and I my eyes open
Yeah.
to things that I didn't know. Like it's kind of that type of experience. And then every time I sit down for the time I put in, that kind of percolates through. So yeah, I mean, if you if you rush through the journey, especially I feel like epic fantasy or like fantasy in general, because it's in a different world and you're really you're building a lot of creative
Yeah,
scaffolding, right? Um, that's where taking your time and letting it percolate is huge.
absolutely.
Because yeah, you can't kind of rush through and just rely on your sense of the world and how the world works. And where that level of revision isn't necessarily well, yeah, I mean, there could be books that are like regular fiction set in the world that you could do a lot of revision, and there's always depth you can bring into it. But I think sometimes you can do less
Yeah.
revision if it was, say, like a thriller set in the U.S. and it's some government conspiracy, and you'd have to do your research and stuff and make sure the story flows well. But the all that deep level rumination
Yeah.
that you need for fantasy, it's not necessarily there with other genres. So
So do you think it's mostly us fantasy writers who tend to be a little slower?
I think so. I mean, I guess there's always exceptions. I think in terms of market, even reader expectations are that the authors take longer. At fantasy, I would say literary fiction, because like just because something is set in the real
Hmm.
world doesn't mean doesn't have those layers. Like, there's I'll take a book I read recently, The Orphan Master's Son by I want to say it's Adam Jones. I'm sure I'm getting it's Adam something. Anyway, so someone out there knows. um, anyway, it's about North Korea. It's about a young man in North Korea and his growing up and getting involved with the political regime. And that book I think took years to
So it's
write.
not a light topic.
And
No.
no, and he did so much research. He even traveled there and just took stuff in, and there's just so much depth to it, right? And I mean, it's set in the real world, but that was you're highlighting a topic, you're treating a subject matter very carefully. So yeah, it's not. I would say it's definitely not just fantasy, but there are certain genres where expectation is turnaround is quicker,
Yeah.
and if the plotting is a little bit lighter and not as complex, same thing with the world building and all that, I think, quicker turnaround is expected. Like, maybe author can put out a book a year, or in some areas of romance,
Much faster.
authors could be putting out multiple books a year. And that's the reader expects that. If you go slower, they'll be like, "Where's
Yeah.
my
Where's
book?"
my? Well, that's yeah.
I was
Yeah, so
expecting.
I see Sheena Mary is replying here, and she says like she's also like she writes literature as well. And yes,
Mhm,
she said my manuscript has been on the back burner for over a year. I happen to know I edited that in August, so that's
mhm,
over 1.5 years ago. So yeah, so that's also it needs
mhm.
to percolate. You need to put it away, see what it
Yeah,
needs, and then of course with Sheena, I'm also
yeah.
co-writing romance, and that is much like we're still
Mhm,
working out the time schedule, and we've almost finished we finished the all the drafts of the first series, but we also realized at this
yeah.
point we need to take a break from it because our other projects, so my fantasy is calling me, and her book
Mhm,
Fletching is also calling her, so her literary work is also calling her. So we need to take a break. But the romance
yeah.
needs to be much faster. Like we can rewrite those.
Right.
Our drafts take about 2 or 3 weeks. Our new drafts, because it's much
Mhm,
lighter. There isn't much research. You just you pick an you. Ours take
mhm,
place half in Scotland, half on an exotic island. So
mhm,
it's much lighter. It's much more fun. It's much more. So you can do
mhm.
that much faster. There isn't as
Yeah,
much
yeah.
layering in that sense, so it is
That's
easier.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I really believe that it's kind of a writer intuition you develop. There are different genres, different stories you play with. you get a sense of what's needed for this to be done, because ultimately that's what it comes down to. You have this sense that, yeah, I'm done.
I'm done. Yeah.
I mean, I'm on my 8th time through this book, and I'm probably still going to go through it a ninth. And that will be because I want to actually do the audio book. So I'm going to read it all and record it.
You're gonna.
And that's like a ninth time to go through. And I just feel like I need to live in this book one more time,
Yeah.
and then I'm done. But I mean, the book will be out, so I'm not going to be like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be doing any more editing. But if I catch a
You
typo,
just upload a new
I'll probably
manuscript.
mark
Yeah.
that down.
Yeah.
And
But that's the thing. It's like,
yeah, because
yeah.
that's the nice thing.
But I've some of my
Yeah.
previous clients were more on the fast track. And when we talked about my writing, I
Hmm.
always got the accusation that I was a perfectionist. And I do think there
Hmm.
are quite a few people who are perfectionists, and they do need to be careful of that,
Yes.
and good enough is good enough. But there is
Yeah.
also knowing, and I think that's the
Yeah.
intuition you're talking about. You just know the story isn't ready, or
Yeah.
I'm not ready there to finalize it, or what have
Yeah.
you. And for me, it's very, I know when I'm being a perfectionist, and then that's my moment when I let
Right.
somebody read it, and they'll tell me it's fine, drop it, it's good, it's good to go.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we just
Yeah.
aren't all fast
I
writers.
think that was, yeah, and that was a big thing that helped me see a process for this book that so 20 to about 2.5 years ago, I decided, yeah, I'm going to publish this. And I knew enough about how the process works because we were getting into doing publishing
Hmm.
ourselves. So I made a schedule, and I coordinated it. I knew who was going to do what edits, and I made a little bit of a timeline. In the end, I was off on the timeline, but not. I mean, more or
Yeah.
less, I didn't do too bad, but it forced me to see beyond
Hmm.
my own perfectionism. Because if I was just looping over it, I had no sense of what I need to leave alone
Yeah.
and what actually needs work. And like there was an edit that or there were actually quite a few edits that I did in the 4th draft, and I mean that draft took me about 6 months to get through. And all I had was an editorial letter. So the editor had read the book, and he wrote me this 5, 6 page
Yeah. Okay.
report,
Yeah. Yeah. I would. Yeah.
and it was very global. And I mean, I had to take so one of my lead female characters was very weak in the earlier drafts. And one thing I did in that revision is I made her as compelling as the antagonist, or at least that was the goal. And that, to me, I felt like her character just came off the page, and I love that about the book now. Um,
Did you hear that?
oh, the sprint timer has gone.
But finish your sentence.
How did we
I
do?
don't know how did we do. We could ask our audience whether
I
we
think we
managed.
did good.
I was thinking this
I'm
thing like
gonna close.
it was a long 25 minutes for me. I was like, is that 20? We're covering
Yeah,
quite a lot. No, but so this is. I think I know which character you're talking about here.
yeah. This would be Lara. I mean,
Yeah.
unless you've read the. My face just went. I looked like I had a face mask because the sun is on, and I closed the blind. Now I look like I'm like a Sith Lord or something. Anyway,
Well, well,
uh,
I still live in the Netherlands. I was thinking red light district.
I'll go with that. I like that better.
Kind of fits the deep desires press a little bit. Yeah. Well, you as
Yeah,
a
yeah.
writer, you have
So
to do creative things to make money, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So
that's right. It's all about and improvising, right? You can plan all you want, but at the end of the day, sometimes the best move, you just make it up in the
yeah,
moment. So there
yeah.
you
And
go.
Sandor here is. Are you seeing these comments as well? I'm curious.
Uh, you know, I'm just seeing the screen. This is my first time
Yeah.
doing
Okay.
this,
So
so
Sandor.
hang on. I don't want to turn it
Okay.
off.
Sandor just said this is one of.
So
Yeah.
you
Sandor
read.
just said this is one of those conversations I could keep listening to. So I think we did good.
Okay.
I think we
Well,
did good.
yeah, and just because we had the timer doesn't mean timer goes and we
No,
vanish,
no,
right?
we
It's
can
just it lets us
absolutely
know, yeah,
finish. Yeah.
we met our intention.
Yes, we made our intention. And I'm
Yeah,
still
yeah.
waiting for the Treebeard quote that you promised.
Oh, Treebeard.
Treebeard.
I'm
Yeah,
trying
and
to
because
remember.
I'll just
See,
explain, as we
was
were
it a
talking about fast writers or hasty
yeah,
writers versus
hasty?
us more slow writers. John said something about like, well, you'll see, we'll quote Treebeard at some point because you were talking about ants versus hasty writers. Yeah, but we're fantasy writers, so come on, yeah. So we can geek out a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know this isn't. Oh, if I was more diligent, I'd flip open Lord of the Rings. I have it over on my desk, and I would actually find the quote. But it's
Mine is in one
something
of
to
my
the effect
boxes.
of, yeah, you're getting all ready for your move. The couple
Actually, because
days.
also wanted to, so maybe you have a copy of that around. I also wanted to show people your journal. Um, but that
Oh,
that is in the
yes.
same box as Lord of the Rings. And actually, my brother
Okay.
just took it out half an hour before, so it's officially out of my house. Cannot touch it. It's
Okay.
stored away until the summer when I
Okay.
can pick it up. Yeah. But
Okay. Well, you never know. That could
let's
be
do
a
the journal at the end. Show that. Yeah.
yeah. So the Treebeard quote is something is not worth saying unless it takes a long
Yes.
time to say.
Yes, I like
And it
that.
doesn't go exactly like that, but
Yeah,
it's
it's something like
something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, so just the idea of an entmoot, how those trees would just gather in the forest and
It's like take
just,
their time. Yeah.
it's like a whole week goes by and we just said hello.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes it feels
That's,
like that. Yeah, it does. Yeah. But
yeah,
but I
yeah.
really like what you said is that we're not saying this is the better way to do things. As you said, some genres need a
Hmm.
different way of doing things, and there are writers who are pulling it off. There are writers who publish 3 books a year in a fantasy world, and they have
Yeah.
very interesting, intricate worlds. It is absolutely
Oh, yeah.
possible. It's
Yeah.
just it's not. I don't think it's possible for a lot of people, and it's definitely not possible if you're
No.
juggling the day job and the family and the yeah. So
Yeah.
it's a nice role model, but don't tear yourself
Yeah. You should
apart
never,
if you don't manage. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's another valid struggle every writer goes through is a comparison syndrome
comparisonitis, yes.
where you see what other people are doing and you feel like you're falling short because you're not fitting into a certain box and that's just as paralyzing as not knowing what to write next, you know? Because I mean, I struggle with this myself. I mean, probably why I've gotten so fortified with my Treebeard stuff is it's my way of
Saying I don't have to do
shutting
this.
that
Yeah,
comparison syndrome
yes.
down because I have to feel like what I'm doing is
Just
okay.
like I'm perfect the way I am. Just like, Yeah, but that's exactly like when I started my accountability group on Facebook. I asked people to introduce themselves and what their goals
Mhm.
were because I just started that just before NaNoWriMo. This so last NaNoWriMo because of
Yeah.
course the November version doesn't come with a cabin and I love the cabin so much. So I thought
Hmm.
let's try a Facebook cabin-like thing, but it's still going on. And at the beginning, the people who introduced themselves were only the people who had like, I'm going to do 5,000 words a day. I'm going to do 6,000 words a day. And
Hmm.
at the end of this week, I need to have 20,000 words done. And I just had to intervene a little bit and say, great. But for the other ones who just
Yeah.
want 100 words a day, you're as valid
Hmm.
a member of this group.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is that my people, my group, and some are more active than the others, are now also sharing their struggles. So instead, because what you often
Hmm.
see and what you often see, of course, online is people only tell you when they publish something, when they sold something, when they
Yeah.
got to the end. And I'm just glad that I can provide a
Hmm.
space in which people feel the freedom to say, it's been 2 weeks since Christmas and I haven't written a word and I don't know how I feel about myself. And then everybody just goes like, you're
Hmm.
human, it's all good, you get back on that horse. Why don't you, maybe you could try this. It's all good, we've all been there. So it's so,
Hmm.
and that's such a
Yeah.
nice, different atmosphere than what you usually see because it's so much more
Hmm.
honest. Um,
Yeah.
so I please do compare then because we're all actually sharing
Yeah.
all the whole part. Like they also know that I'm moving.
Yeah.
and that I'm not as available, and that I'm not as present, and that I'm not telling myself to write at the moment because I was like closed. Like if I also have to write, I
Yeah.
don't know how to do this. So you just take a
Yeah.
step back and just say, I'm here to
Yeah.
support you. I'm not gonna do this for now. And it's really nice amidst all those people
Hmm.
sharing only the good stuff. To have
Right.
like this little group that just goes like, this has been a crap day. Oh, for me as well. And then the other one's like, well, I had a good day,
Yeah.
and this is how I got that good day. So maybe that's useful. It's just a completely different
Yeah.
tone. So I really enjoy that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really good. And then, one thing I like about the sprint timer versus the word count, is that there's no, um, so for me, where I would feel bad or beat myself up is, say, about 7.5 hours worth of work a week. That's about what I'm able to put in on A
Hmm.
Thousand Roads right now. And sometimes that's like one chapter. Sometimes I'm one 25-minute sprint just to fix one paragraph. And how do I put that down as a word count? But at the end of the day, like that thing I did, it's like I feel like those little things just like doubled the power of the book in that spot. And so it's like
Yeah.
I like that all I have to realize is I sat down for that 25 minutes and I focused, I thought I had to sometimes I got to trace back through the early parts of the book, and it's kind of like a lot of times it's Chekhov's gun kind of things. I've got something that I mentioned and it's like, well, I have to see how this was earlier
Yeah, you
set
have to
up
go
to
back.
make
Yeah.
sure it actually makes sense. It's stuff like that you can rush through in earlier drafts, but then in the end you're like, no, this has to be in
Yeah.
place. There's no room for any like sweeping under
No,
the
no.
rug.
But that's the thing,
So,
and I think especially and that's what I've been also, that's something, and I think I'm changing the mindset right now. So in this group that I have,
mhm,
is from the get-go, I started like when people were complaining about the fact that I hadn't put any new words out, so they didn't write. I kept saying, but writing is the whole
mhm.
process. So if you've been spending an
Yeah.
hour talking to your cover designer, that is writing for me
Hmm.
because it's about getting to the
Yeah.
published product. And now I see that they're trying,
Yes.
I see them sort of like read. So we've been doing this for about 4 months, and it's finally like me
Yeah.
insistently telling everyone in the group, no, but this is also writing. It's finally paying off. It's finally like you're doing good. And I think, and
Hmm.
this is for me, like, so I didn't sprint before I met you and our
Hmm.
NaNoWriMo group. And it's been a game changer for me as well because I also like I have days when I rewrite. Yeah, how do you? Yeah, so it sounds
Hmm.
it's like so when I'm sprinting with Maddie. So Maddie is one of our members.
Hmm.
Like Maddie will have like 350 words, but those are new words, and then I have like I have 12
Yeah.
like 1200, but that's editing, so that's not new words.
Yeah.
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 But for me, it
And
works
it
because
gets to
it's
the
quick.
point
Yeah.
where trying to keep track of what you actually got written new, it takes,
That, oh,
as
yeah.
it's sort of like an extra headache that you don't need to think about when you're
Yeah. So
editing.
I like to know at the end of the week how many hours, and then I know I did something useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think for me, that sort of makes, and I think especially so for the slow riders watching, this is definitely something you could try, because it changes
Hmm.
your mindset because you see, you have proof that you've done the work, even though you don't
Hmm.
have 3 new chapters written. You have the proof that you've been, spending the time, you've putting the work in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like the sprints really changed my life. As a slow
Hmm.
writer,
Well,
it really changed how I see
yeah.
myself as a writer. So yeah.
Yeah. I really feel like the sprinting is something that kind of it extends what NaNoWriMo sort of, because NaNoWriMo is great for a first draft. It can be a second if you're rewriting it, but um, I think it's sort of like if you like what NaNoWriMo does with its push to sort of
Hmm.
write daily or keep track, but the thing is something more adaptable for the further drafts and other type of writing work you can do, and you can still keep track of, my goal was to spend X amount of time
Yeah.
each week or whatever, or each month. And you can then say, hey, look, I did this much.
Well,
So, and you can look back at everything you got done, because maybe you didn't write a chapter in a week, but over the month, maybe you got two and a
yeah.
half. And that's worth
Yeah, and
celebrating.
that's also why I like Camp NaNoWriMo. So, like, I know a lot of people don't know that NaNoWriMo also has Camp
Hmm.
NaNoWriMo. So, in April and July, there's also Camp. And Camp, you can add, so of course,
Hmm.
NaNoWriMo is 50,000 words. That's just the goal. But
Yeah,
in Camp, you can do whatever. So, you can say, I want to write 600 pages. You can say,
yeah.
I want to rewrite three scripts. I want to put so many hours in. So you can
Mm,
actually put the hours in NaNoWriMo for the camps. And I think that's why I enjoy
yeah.
those more. Because
Mm,
you can actually, your goal can be whatever. And I
yeah.
tend to use NaNoWriMo for rewriting, just to have, like, that extra
Okay,
push
yeah,
to
yeah,
make sure I have a
yeah,
month to rewrite this entire book. So I tend to use it to
yeah,
rewrite. So then for me, camp
yeah.
works better because you can do
Right.
anything during the camps. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You're not sort of you're not sort of forced to say it's this month and I have to start a new
yeah.
draft. Like, let's
Yeah.
say I'm actually gonna try this November to start a new novel. I have a project. I have a project in mind, and but I mean, I knew ahead of time, so I feel like you kind of have to have it coordinated, because otherwise, if you're busy in midst of other types of writing, that suddenly you just add something extra to your plate. So that's what makes it a little hard. Whereas, like you say with the camp, it's anything.
Whatever
It's
you're
like, here's
working
this month,
on,
what's
yeah,
my goal?
yeah, yeah. So that
Yeah,
fits much better for me as
yeah,
well. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So do you
yeah.
wanna
So
do you wanna end
great.
and show us your journal and how you use that as a writer?
Yeah, well, just give me a sec. I'm gonna grab it off the shelf here. Well, I mean, this all started as something by hand, but this is the one talking
Yes,
about. It's
that's the one
it's
I
it's
have.
something that I published. Um, I so I think the big thing for me is I started journaling every day, and it was a very basic practice where I like gratitude
Hmm.
journaling, but I wanted to keep it simple, and I wanted it something that I could do every day, that it doesn't take up too much time where I put it off. So essentially at the end of every day, I write down three things that happened in the day that I'm grateful for. Then I write down three struggles, and then I kind of reflect on things, and then I'll make three intentions for the next day. And so, you can just kind of keep going through this. And what I find neat is, over time, you can kind of flip back through earlier days, and you can see, what
What
were
you
my
did, yeah.
intentions? How did I do? Like, I'll actually go back to the previous day and give myself a check mark, an X, or a tilde. Is like, sometimes I have an intention and it did something different, but it was the same idea. Like, let's say if I
Yeah.
planned to eat a healthy certain dinner, and I didn't eat that dinner, but I didn't have a garbage meal, right? Like, I would give myself a tilde for that. So,
Yeah, I've used
um,
that. Yeah, I use that. I need to get back into journaling because, of course, my life went a little crazy in the last few months. But I like the tildes. I like the tildes very much. Like, it was interesting to add that because I'm used to
yeah,
gratitude journaling as well. So it was nice to add that.
yeah,
Yeah. So that's why I wanted to bring up because I actually use it, or I've
yeah.
used it until I sort of,
Okay,
got
good.
sidetracked completely. But that's why I wanted to use it, and it's also because I started gratitude journaling to sort of give myself a boost as a writer
Hmm.
because I can just write down, well,
Mm,
I
hmm.
did write for 30 minutes, so that I can be grateful about that. So for me, it really
Yeah.
boost my writing practice as well. Yeah. So that's how I
Hmm.
journal about everything. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
the nice,
I started this as a writer. Yeah.
right, yeah. And the thing is, the practice of looking for three things, like, there's always going to be
Yes.
three. Sometimes you have to stop and think about it, but that's the value I find, because, like, I can have a day that just, this day's felt really crappy.
Yeah. There's
And then if
always
I
yeah. There's
start
always some
by,
light.
okay, so yeah, I'm going to get to that.
Yeah, there's
But
always some
I
light.
start
Yeah.
by looking at, yeah, and then you realize, oh, actually, I like these things, and then like, but then you get to your struggles, and you're like, yeah, this was a tough day, and then you just sort of acknowledge that, and so then you think about tomorrow. What do you want to? And like I find a lot of times I can learn from previous
Yeah.
days, and like the true value in this is just having like a log that I can look back in and sort of see how I've been thinking and changing. And sometimes, you connect to yourself a year ago and you see how you looked at your life, and that, like, a lot of times there's little things that I didn't I'd forgotten all about that I was doing. And so
Yeah. So that also makes you, yeah.
um
Yeah. I like that. Yes, that's why I wanted to
yeah.
bring it
And
up.
this
Yeah.
journal
But I
here,
really enjoyed it as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, thank you. And it's like 100-day starter. So what I wanted to do with this is anybody can pick it up, and if you miss a bunch of days, you just start the day after, right? But it just lets you try 100 days of this out, and then I have instructions in the back
Yeah.
for how you can continue this. So you don't have to just keep buying these. Like I actually, most of my journals are in, I do them all by hand. So this is just to give you 100 days of it to practice, and then from there you can move on and keep whole notebooks full on your shelves, and then you've got years of your life
Yeah.
to reflect
Yeah. Well, I do
on.
it as well. Yeah.
So
And of course, it takes
yeah,
about 100 days to start to create a habit.
yeah. I don't know exactly what the time is, but
It
I mean
depends. It depends
for
on
yeah,
bigger things about 90, 100 days.
yeah.
So
Oh,
smaller
okay.
things about 2, 3 weeks, I think. I read an article about it once.
Yeah.
But like bigger things, like a writing
Ah,
practice, that's why a lot of writing
yeah,
programs, including my own, is 3 months. Because you need a
yeah,
particular time to get adjusted. When it's a big
yeah.
thing, you need a particular time to sort of incorporate it to your system. But smaller things, like for
Right.
instance, using a toothpick before you brush your teeth, those things take like 2 weeks or so. Like that, the article mentions something simple
Yeah.
like that. But then the bigger things, the
Hmm.
more life-altering things, they take a little longer. There will be more resistance as well, I think. If there is some level to it. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So something like deciding I'm going to write for the last half hour of every
Yeah.
day. Like,
Yeah.
or if you decide something like that and you want to try it out, that would take a while before that just becomes so habitual. I mean, one thing I do is I always go to bed with a clean kitchen, and like it's almost so built in now that it's the first thing I do. If we're out late and we get home, first thing I do is clean the kitchen.
I've never had that
But it took
habit.
it.
I should pick that up. I should pick that
Oh,
up probably.
well, it's yeah, what's funny is that it's example of what you just mentioned, though, that is it. There was a while where I just decided, I want to wake up in the morning with a clean kitchen.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I'm going to make this a rule and try it out. And yeah, it definitely took a couple months of not having any excuse. And what happened is all my other priorities shift around, right? So, but if we like to clean the kitchen doesn't take that long if you do it every day.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
And once I got that built in as a habit, it's just so automatic now. But yeah, I agree. Anything that requires energy, and you have to change your time management habits. I think that does take a while to build in. Like, I'd even say 3 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes you
Yeah,
can
long
even,
depends. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think actually, because
yeah.
for me,
So,
what I've noticed is that my life really started changing around once I started journaling. There was always something that I really resisted, and once I started
mm-hmm.
journaling, and also not just journaling, but also telling myself to look back. And I think if you like, so
Ah,
what you
yes.
have with your cleaning the kitchen is that, of course, if you then look back in your, if you have a gratitude journal or you take like bullet journals are now in, so if you track your mood, And you at one point
Hmm.
realize, oh wait, the
Mm.
days that I started with a clean kitchen is the days when my moods were much higher. It becomes so much easier
Mm.
to
Mhm.
incorporate the habit because you see the proof that it's actually changing your
Yeah.
life for the better. So I think for me, the
Yes.
if you're trying a new habit, also if you're trying to write for every day, for example, like having a gratitude
Yeah.
journal, some kind of form of that, that is
Hmm.
very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think writing stuff down, there's a power
Yes, it's the
to it.
reason why we write, right?
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And like actually writing things by hand, that's a big one for me. I find like, there's all kinds of to-do apps and stuff. I can get reminders on my phone, but for anything related to work, I need to write
Yeah.
it down. And I mean, I have a big black marker. It's a special, like it's big and thick. And when I'm done on something, I cross it out.
Oh,
It
is
just
it like
feels
one with
so
the
good.
with the felt tip is like a square? Yeah, I
Yeah.
know the
And
ones.
it
Yeah.
just bleeds ink.
Yes.
And like I could cross it out with a pen, but it's just something about that gesture. It's
Yeah,
just like so
I need me
solid,
one of those.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I think it's just a
Yeah.
Sharpie marker, get a certain thickness and like yeah, I started doing that and I think this is
Yes.
psychological stuff,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think when you're doing mental work, stuff that involves using your head, um, when you have to also think about everything you have to do, that takes up all kinds of memory. So I think the process of getting stuff written down somewhere and then like crossing out, then you can just focus on the work
Yeah.
you have to
Very
get done.
cathartic, especially with a.
And
I need one of
yeah,
those pens. I'm gonna grab one. One sec.
Sharpie
Yes.
Sharpie marker,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you get settled in your new place,
Yes, that's like on my
you can go
list.
out
It's
and
like
get one
forget a
and
new toothbrush. I need
yeah,
my big fat Sharpie marker to cross out my tools.
yeah,
Hey, I think we can finalize. I think we've covered quite a
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
I probably did two sprints.
yeah.
Last thing I want to mention is that just for the people out there is that on the 17th of March is my company's birthday. We're turning 5 years old.
Oh,
Yeah, it's been long. It's like interesting. It's a day I went to the our Chamber
that's
of
yeah.
Commerce and like officially registered as a company.
Okay.
And it's a
Yeah.
Sunday, and I'm gonna celebrate it by doing all kinds of giveaways that day. And I was gonna include your
Oh,
journal. So for people who are watching and are like,
okay.
this sounds really interesting,
Yes.
I still need to make an event, but keep look at my page and because I'm gonna give away
Mhm.
all the writing books, a copy of all the writing books that inspired me. So I also give away Stephen King's On Writing, for example. So all the books that have inspired me, I'm gonna
Awesome.
all day giveaways, and I was gonna include your book as well. So I'm glad you showed it. So everybody who thought that sounds
Okay.
interesting, of course you
Thank
can
you.
just order it on Amazon if you don't want to wait. Like I would do that as well. Like just go, and it's like what is it, €9 or something? Well, you wouldn't know because you're
Yeah,
yes,
it's cheap.
yes.
Like I said it
Yeah.
about I think I said it at 9.99 US.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was
So,
like eight
yeah,
ninety
I
nine,
mean,
and I didn't have to pay any shipping
mhm.
either. So it was
Oh, that's good.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
The German Amazon, it's
I
taken over the
like that.
Netherlands. Is really good.
Mhm.
Yes, but I'm giving away a copy as well because it's so useful.
Okay.
I think it's very useful. So
Thank you.
okay, thank you
Yeah.
so much for doing this. I had fun.
Awesome.
And I told you we couldn't
Me
do it in
too.
25 minutes. I have no idea what time it is now. I don't
No.
because all my clocks are gone. So I have no idea and I'm on my phone.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um, but yeah,
It feels like it went the right amount of time.
yeah.
I like that we had 25 minutes 'cause I feel like we
Ah, see, and now I'm losing you. Oh, there you are. So your internet thinks it's time because you're freezing. Yeah,
uh-oh, am
yeah,
I
you're back.
back?
But I think what you're trying to say is in that
Oh,
25 minutes we were very focused. Yeah, so for people
yeah,
who
and
just
then
watch the
we
first
sort
25
of
minutes, they're golden.
and if people are still watching, they're like, yeah, they went overtime. So there you
Yeah,
go.
we tried. Yeah, see, Sandro says, well, yeah,
Yeah, we did
universe says
good.
it's time. Yeah, because you were freezing. They're like, come on, people. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think it's just a telemarketer that just won't leave me alone.
Oh
And
yeah, I love those. I love
I
those,
don't.
especially this time around.
Yeah,
This time of year. They're yeah,
I
yeah.
Yeah, I was able to just hit
Okay,
reject and it didn't pull me out of
good.
here. So I'm grateful for
Yes.
that.
Well, I'm grateful that you did this with me. I was so when I first thought of this, like you were
Yeah,
one of the
thank you.
first people on my list.
Oh,
So
well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to join you on here, and um, I'll look forward. I'm gonna sort of be lurking when you have your party for your
yes, I'll make that.
5-year
I should make
birthday.
that Facebook
Couple of,
event. All the things that I still need to
yeah.
do. And please feel free to drop the link, the Amazon link to your book underneath
Okay.
the conversation for the
Yeah.
people who are interested. And also, of course, A Thousand
Okay.
Roads. Come on, just put it out there.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and keep
I
lurking,
will.
and I'll share the event link once I made it. I make it. I will. Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
You enjoy the
Okay.
rest of your
Well, thanks for
day.
having me. Yeah, you too, and all the best with your move.
You'll be updated. You'll hear everything about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll hear about it behind the
Yes, you
scenes.
will. Yes, you
Okay.
will. Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Okay.